Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be talking about human body systems, which was a unit that we didn't have enough time to cover this year because of everything we've been dealing with. So I'm going to go over really briefly, the body systems of the human body, so that way for your capstone project you have a starting point to pick which body systems might interest you or which might be relevant for your particular organism of your capstone project. So here we go. We're going to start first with the circulatory system. So this is made up of the heart and the blood vessels and the blood. The function is to pump blood throughout the body. Blood carries oxygen, glucose, and nutrients to body tissues. Remember, we need oxygen and glucose for cellular respiration. All of our cells need to do that. So the way they get that glucose and oxygen is from the circulatory system. It also removes carbon dioxide, which is a waste product of cellular respiration, from the body. So we bring the oxygen to the body cells use it to make energy, and then release carbon dioxide waste, which is brought back to the heart, pumps it back to the lungs, we can breathe it out. Blood also plays a role in fighting infections, which we'll talk about later when we get to the immune system, but white blood cells do a really good job at keeping our body safe from germs. The main structures of the circulatory system are the heart and the blood vessels. We have a 4-chambered heart, 1, 2, 3, 4 chambers. So if you're doing an animal for your project that's a reptile or an amphibian or even a fish, this would be a great system to compare because they have different structures for their heart. We have a 4-chambered heart, just like most mammals, but some organisms do not. So that's something to think about. Let me move myself here. We've also got blood vessels, so arteries carry blood away from the heart that's full of oxygen. Capillaries are those tiny blood vessels where gas exchange can happen, so oxygen and carbon dioxide can pass through those cell walls. And then veins carry blood back to the heart. Blood is made up of a couple different important components. We've got red blood cells, which you're probably very familiar with. Those carry oxygen, these nice big red donut looking things. We've got white blood cells, which fight infections. Platelets, which form blood clots and scabs. So if you get a cut, right, you don't just keep bleeding forever. Those platelets kind of stick together and form a clot, so you don't bleed forever. And then plasma is the liquid component of blood that everything floats around in. Next, we've got the respiratory system. So this works to take in oxygen from the environment and get rid of CO2 waste product. You can see here, these are actual lung structures from an actual human. The lung tissue is melted away, but you can see the bronchioles, which are those tiny little tubules. It looks very much like tree branches, right? All these little functional units are where gas can get exchanged, which is awesome. Here are the other structures of the respiratory system. Air comes in through the trachea, into the bronchi, bronchioles, which are those smaller tree branches that I talked about before. And at the very end of all of those bronchioles are the alveoli, or alveolus, which is the singular. They're surrounded by capillaries, which is where gas can be exchanged. So when we breathe in, we have a high concentration of oxygen in the alveoli, low concentration in the blood. So the oxygen can diffuse from the alveoli into the blood. Same thing for carbon dioxide. So when the blood comes back to the lungs, it's very rich in carbon dioxide. So there's a high concentration in the blood, low concentration in the lungs, and it just diffuses out and you breathe out. Good old-fashioned diffusion. Next, we'll look at the nervous system. So it's made up of the brain and spinal cord, peripheral nerves of the body. This system functions as sensory, right? We're collecting information through our senses from the environment, passing that information to our brain to be processed. Also integration, which just means thinking, right? Decision making. And motor responses. So our brain can tell our nerves, which tell our muscles how we want to move, so we can create movement. If you have an organism like a whale or a bat or a viper that has some kind of heat sensing pits, or a dolphin that does echolocation. This would be a great system to compare for organisms like that. Next, we've got the skeletal system, which is made up of all the bones of the body. Bones are actual living tissues, right? They grow, they heal. So when you're comparing bones to an animal, you want to look at the shapes. A lot of animals are going to have the same bones unless you have something like a fish or an insect, which don't have bones at all. So that could be something really cool to compare. But if you are doing an animal that has bones, you might want to compare the structures, the layout of the bones. How are they formed differently? Functions of the skeletal system include support, right? It keeps our body upright and supported. Protection of organs, right? The skull's protecting the brain. Ribs are protecting the lungs and the heart and the liver. Blood cell formation actually happens inside the bones in the bone marrow, so inside the long bones. And then it stores inorganic salts like calcium phosphate and other things like that, which our cells need to function. Next, we've got the muscular system. So these muscle tissue can contract to produce movement, helps us move around, maintains or stabilizes our body position, right? Keeps us upright, and our organ volume, and it helps to produce heat, right? If you're exercising, you're sweating. The reason why you're sweating is those muscles are working and producing heat. Keeps us warm. Next, we've got the digestive system. So let me move myself so you can see. Has a couple important functions. Break down food, right? Digestion. We can do that mechanically with our teeth, right? By chewing, or chemically, like with the enzymes and acids in our stomach, into smaller pieces. Once they're broken down in the stomach, food goes into the small intestine where it can be absorbed. So those tiny little food molecules that we broke them down into, they can pass into the capillaries of the blood and can be delivered to body cells. And then whatever we don't need, whatever isn't absorbed, goes into the large intestine, which is here, and then eliminated as waste, right? Poop. Next, we've got the endocrine system. So this system produces hormones that regulate metabolism, growth and development, tissue function, sexual function, reproduction, sleep, mood. Pretty much everything that we do is regulated by the endocrine system. So all of these glands in the body produce different hormones that have different functions. And it kind of functions like the nervous system in a way that it helps the body communicate to other parts. It just does it a little more slowly. Immune system is something we're definitely hearing a lot about now, right? In the news with this virus that we're dealing with. The immune system protects the body from environmental agents like bacteria, viruses, and chemicals. Our first line of defense is our skin, our mucous membranes, right? If our skin is intact, we're keeping that virus and bacteria out. That's why they say for this particular virus, don't touch your face and touch your eyes, because if that virus is on our skin, it can't get in unless you have a cut. The way that it gets in is you touch food and you eat it, you touch your nose, you touch your eye, right? Then it can get into those mucous membranes. Stomach acid is another great way that prevents food poisoning all the time, because a lot of the food that we eat has small amounts of bacteria on it. Bacteria is everywhere. That's why our stomach has so much acid, to help kill that bacteria so we don't get sick. The biggest defense in our body is our white blood cells. All of these are different types of white blood cells that you see here. They all have different jobs for the immune system. I'll talk about a couple in a second. But most of them are to mark and form antibodies that target particular germs, particular viruses and bacteria. And then other ones come and they kill that stuff because we don't want it in our body. So let's look a little more closely at how this works. So when the body system senses foreign substances, which we can call antigens, so things like viruses and bacteria, the immune system works to recognize the antigens and get rid of them. White blood cells are triggered to make antibodies. So these little purple T-shaped things here are antibodies. Remember, the antigen is the bad thing that we don't like. So the virus, for example, these green guys here. So the white blood cells make antibodies that recognize this particular virus. The antibodies stay in a person's body. That way, if the immune system encounters that antigen again, the antibodies are ready to do their job. So they mark the antigen, and then other killer cells come and gobble it up, right? We know that those things are bad. We don't want them. So once they're marked with these antibodies, we can destroy them. So that's why when someone gets sick from a virus like the chicken pox, they usually don't get sick from it again, right? You get it once when you're a kid, your body marks it, we make antibodies that are specific to that particular virus, so our body knows that when we come in contact with that virus again, it can kill it and we never even get symptoms. So that's really awesome that our body can do that. This is the same way vaccines work, right? Vaccines tell our body to produce antibodies for a particular antigen because viruses are like an antigen that's not really functioning well. So our body can recognize it and make tons of these antibodies. So that way when we do come in contact with a particular virus, we're able to fight it with a whole army of white blood cells. And we either get very little symptoms or none at all, which is awesome. So that's what we're hoping for this particular COVID-19 virus. We need a vaccine to help us make all these antibodies. And you've probably been hearing about the antibody therapy that they're doing for people who have recovered from the virus. Their body has made all these antibodies, so we're trying to take plasma from people who have those antibodies so we can give it to the sick people so that way their immune system gets a bit of a boost. You can also make artificial ones in a lab, which is awesome. Next, we've got the skin, the integumentary system. Skin, you might not think it's an organ system, but it is. It's a really big organ. It's got a lot of functions. Protects us, right? Keeps microorganisms out, chemicals out. And it's water resistant for the most part, so we don't melt in the rain. Sensation, we've got nerves in our skin that help us to sense things from our environment, helps with temperature regulation, right? You can sweat if you're hot, you can shiver if you're cold. Excretion, gets rid of waste products through glands in our skin, and helps to produce vitamin D when the sun's out. Excretory system helps remove waste from the body, right? We've got kidneys, which filter our blood, so it filters all the waste out from our blood. The waste products go down these little tubes called ureters into our urinary bladder, and you can pee out all that waste, right? Excess water, excess waste products, whatever we don't need in our blood, that's how it's filtered out. And last but not least, the good old-fashioned reproductive system, different in males and females, but they both have a gonad gland. So in the males, the gland is the testes, female, the gland is the ovaries. The function is to produce sex cells through meiosis, right? Both of those glands do that. Female's job is to protect and nourish a developing fetus until birth. Right, here's the uterus here, which is right below the urinary bladder in females, and that's where the fetus develops. And male's job is to deposit the sperm into the female reproductive system in order to fertilize an egg. And if you're doing a organism like reptiles, birds, kangaroos have 3 vaginas, any of those would be a really good system. The reproductive system would be a really great one to compare, right? Any organism that lays eggs, right? That's very different from how humans' reproductive systems work. So that might be a cool system to compare if you're looking at that. All right, I hope this was helpful. Good luck with your capstone project and let me know if you need any help.